Welcome to Life and Service. I'm your host, Catalina Lee, and this is the podcast where we talk about the hospitality industry and everything that goes into it. Every week at 7, we'll be releasing new episodes with many guests to come. Thank you so much for watching, and I can't wait for you to hear it. Hello, and welcome back to Life and Service, episode 3, Crew Love. Today we're going to be talking about what you can probably expect from my punny titles. We're going to be talking about support staff. So when I say support staff, I mean like anybody that is not a server or a bartender. You can honestly even put bartender in that category of support staff because of, how they help you as a server. But more specifically for today's topic, we're going to be talking about people like your bussers or your server assistants, your host, your food runners, your back of house positions. So I'm really going to get into the nitty gritty and talk about why they're important and, how they're kind of treated and why most often they are really overlooked. So let's talk about the reason that they are important. When you are, like, for example, driving a car, every piece of that car, every gear, every whatever nozzle, whatever you want to call it, I'm not a car person, when all of those things are working together, it makes the entire vehicle run properly. If something is not working properly, it sets up the rest of the vehicle to start to fail. That being said, a restaurant is the very same thing. Like when you are low staffed on bussers or server assistants, it affects your servers immediately. And when your servers are affected, then the guests are directly affected. If there's not enough people in the kitchen, or if the kitchen is like putting out food that's not up to par, like those things all affect you. So, long story short, teamwork makes the dream work. Okay, so let's get into it. Let's talk about what each of these positions really are. So starting off with like our front of house, our host/hostess. A host or hostess is the first point of contact for a guest entering a restaurant. They're the first space that they see, the first impression. So they greet the guest, manage reservations / a wait list if there is one, and they seat those guests efficiently. They kind of set the tone for the entire dining experience. So if you go into a restaurant and your host is rude to you, or there's like a huge wait, obviously those things are going to affect your mood. One, because you're hungry and you're already a little possibly irritable. So those things are obviously going to affect the rest of your night or lunch or morning or whatever. Most importantly though, hostesses help manage the flow of the restaurant and keep service smooth. That is the most important thing that they do. It is like the entirety of their job position. Okay, that is what affects everything else. Moving on, you have your bussers / server assistants. So bussers support their servers by clearing tables. If they're a server assistant, they're really just like cleaning up the last of it. Even most bussers are really just cleaning up the last of it, meaning like cups, some trash, and that should pretty much be it. Everything else your server should be clearing. Resetting the table quickly and efficiently, cleaning the table off, etc. Refilling waters or like water glasses, that is primarily a server assistant job rather than a busser. And then sometimes assisting with minor guest requests. So like if you see a server assistant walking by your table and you're like, hey, can you grab me a side of ketchup? Like those are the kinds of things we're referring to. So their work really ensures that the tables are ready for new guests promptly when, obviously they're clearing and resetting. And then they're helping maintain a fast and efficient turnover. That is like the number one thing that a restaurant needs the servers assistants / bussers to do, is to turn those tables quickly. So as soon as a table gets up from there, your busser or server assistant should be darting towards that table to clean it off, wipe it down, put a new linen if they do that, and reset the table. Like that's literally like the most important thing they're doing. Moving on, you have your food runners, kind of starting to gear towards the back of house. So food runners act as the critical link between the kitchen and the dining room. A lot of the times you have food runners who like also help out as expo, depending on the restaurant you work at. You have food runners who are used as, like I mentioned, messengers from the kitchen to the server staff. So if there's something wrong with your food, obviously the chef is not going to come out of the kitchen to go on the floor and find you. They're going to send a food runner. That food runner is going to be like, hey, like, this was confusing on the ticket. How do you want this? Et cetera, et cetera. That's the direct communication link that you're going to have there. That being said, what they actually are doing majority of the time, though, is they're picking up the prepared dishes from the kitchen line and they're delivering them directly to the correct tables. Now, it's possible room for error because, God forbid, you take the wrong plate to the table or you take the correct plate but to the wrong table. Those kinds of things really, really can cause a huge mess up. So, especially if it's something really important, like something that was cooked incorrectly that had to get sent back, you would hate to take that to the wrong table. Or if it's something like a table's food was taking too long and then you took it to the wrong table, like, that is bad. In those kinds of situations, as a food runner, it's really, really, really important to be completely and 100% sure of what you're doing and where you are going. Also, making sure that when you are delivering that food, that it arrives promptly. Like I mentioned, you don't want the table waiting too long and in the best condition. That's meaning like any garnishes that go on top are there. Anything that looks like it's not plated correctly or like it's done sloppy, that's really important for them to catch and be like, hey, we need to redo this, whatever. Also, depending on where you work, it's not the same everywhere, but I know that there are certain steakhouses where you drop that food off and you're like, hey, can you cut into that steak for me? You know what I mean? If that's the case for the restaurant that you work at, usually when food runners are dropping that food off, they're the ones asking that question. Moving on. So talking about kitchen staff. When you're talking about kitchen staff, you are breaking down several different positions. So a kitchen staff is the backbone of food preparation, and they include several specialized roles working together to produce the menu's offerings. So obviously starting at the top, you have your chefs, your head chefs. They are the leaders of the kitchen, responsible for creating the menus if you're working in a restaurant where the chef is the chef, or just managing the kitchen team, overseeing food quality, and ensuring consistency. That's like what they do. Basically, they are the presidents of the kitchen. That's their role. The executive chef manages the entire kitchen, while sous chefs assist and supervise specific areas. So usually, depending on how large your restaurant is, the way your restaurant works, most of the time you will have two chefs on the line. It's either, your head chef and you have like an expo chef, or your head chef and your sous chef, or maybe sometimes you work in a kitchen where your head chef is on the side of the line that's closest to the or to the main dining room, and then the other is behind the line. Those are just like different kinds of instances that you might see in a restaurant. Moving down the line to line cooks. So line cooks work on specific stations during service. So preparing and cooking dishes as, the menu requires. Each line cook is typically assigned a station specializing in a certain food type or preparation method. So you have your prep cooks, which we'll talk about next. You have your different stations. When I say different stations, I mean things like broil, which are things that go on a grill, like steaks, for example. You have your saute, which are things that, you can guess by the name, are sauteed. You have salad station or dessert station, or if you work in a little more higher elevated dining, you have a cold station and a pantry station. The difference between those, it really just depends on whether or not your restaurant serves cold seafood. So usually in a cold station, those are usually like hot and cold appetizers. I know it's confusing because a lot, sometimes when you work in a restaurant that has a cold station, those dishes that are also hot and are appetizers can also be taken out of that station. So it does get a little confusing, but obviously, like, when you start a restaurant like that, they make it so you know what you're doing. What I mean as far as like serving cold or raw fish, that is why we have a cold station. So a lot of things that, for example, if you're doing a tartare on your menu, that's going to come out of there. Now, depending on the restaurant you work at, it is also very possible that if you are serving cold fish, like shrimp cocktail or oysters or whatever, those things might come out of your pantry / what you would call a salad station, because salads also come out of there, and so do desserts. Pantry is a super, super, super important part of the line, especially if they're a station where you get, those cold fish appetizers, those salads, those desserts, because that is 3 different kinds of things that they are having to do, especially on your menu if you have multiple different kinds of salads or different seafood platter options. And then obviously the entire dessert menu is coming from that station. So those are things that are really, really, really important. And they're also a really small part of the line. So a lot of times there's not a lot of room for multiple people back there, which does kind of make it hard. All right, so moving on, let's talk about prep cooks. So prep cooks work before service begins. They are usually handling the preparation of ingredients such as, chopping vegetables, making sauces, portioning meats, that kind of thing. Their work ensures that the line cooks can focus on cooking and assembling dishes during busy hours. This is eliminating one less step that a line cook has to do. That's the importance of a prep cook. The prep cook is doing exactly what it sounds like, prepping food, So usually you won't really ever see prep cooks like during a busy service. They are always either coming in super early first thing in the morning if you have a lunch service, or if you only have dinner service, coming in like early-ish midday to prep for that night shift. It's really important that your prep cooks are there, especially if you work in a restaurant where you're like, you serve like different breads. Like, they're preparing that bread to be ready to be tossed in the oven, cooked up for a couple minutes, and then served. They are making those desserts that just need to be thrown in the microwave for a few minutes and then served. Like, those are the things that they're doing, as well as all of the prepping. So they're really, really, really important to making sure that a line of chefs is able to run properly. Moving on to our last back of house position that we're going to talk about, which is dishwashers. Dishwashers clean all of the cookware, all of the utensils, all of the plates. They keep the kitchen stocked with clean items, and they maintain hygiene standards. So if you've ever worked in a restaurant and seen a dishwasher station, it's usually in like a L shape, or sometimes it's just like a really large square area of the restaurant. And that machine that they push everything through is constantly moving. That little long hose that they use is constantly on, constantly rinsing things off, separating, taking buckets of silverware and pushing those through, and they have to do multiple things. So if you work in a restaurant that has different buckets, which most of them will, for the servers to take back different utensils and put them into said allocated buckets, they then have to grab those buckets once they are full, put them on a dish rack, push the dish rack through, okay? And then, because sometimes your dish washer, machine isn't always gonna get the most efficient clean out of that, because it's a huge dishwasher. It's not like a really focused, super, super cleanly dishwasher. Most of the time, once those dishes get pushed through, they have to go into a separation rack, which is where you take all of those utensils, separate them by fork, knife, spoon, etc. And then when they're in that separation rack, you give it back to them, and then they push that through. So usually utensils get washed a couple times. It's the most efficient way to do it. And then once they're done, you have to polish them. It's really important to clean utensils like this specifically, because these utensils are utensils that guests see, obviously. So you want to make sure that they're not only clean, but they don't have any residue left on them, that they are polished, there's no watermarks, there's no, grimy little crust that you can't see but you can feel. anything like that. Like, you don't want that. Dishwashers, they also have to make sure that they are changing the dish water. I believe it's every 30 minutes to an hour. The reason that it's not that long of a time period between when they should be changing water is because in that time, they are pushing so much through. They're pushing racks of plates, bowls, pans, etc. Like, anything you can think of that goes in a dishwasher, they're pushing it through. So it's really, really, really important that they change that dishwasher water, because when they're not changing the water, then that leads to really, really dirty dishes. Okay? So, moving back to our front of house, we want to talk about how the hosts are, like I mentioned earlier, the first and the last impression. They do a lot of really important stuff. As tips for you as servers, if you are a server listening to this, be kind to your hosts. Your hosts are working really hard. They're dealing with the guests who are getting angry at the front and talking to them all crazy because they're being told that they have to wait 10 minutes to get sat. Oh well, boo-hoo. Okay? Listen. Be kind to your hosts. If you are the kind of server that likes to hang out at the host stand and chit chat and whatever, if there's a lot of people up there and they look mad, do not sit at that host stand. At all. Okay? It makes the host look bad. It makes the guests more irritable because they're like, oh, look, the hosts aren't even doing their job. They're just chit-chatting. Whatever. They're also doing a lot in terms of making sure that the server can provide specialized guests. If you work in a fine dining restaurant specifically, a lot of times you'll have little tickets that you'll get when a table gets sat that has whether or not they're celebrating something special, or if they have any tiny little notes what their wife's name may be or whatever. Your hosts are the ones putting that into the system. So if you get a table and you write down an entire sheet of information on this table, you're yeah, this is their husband's name, wife's name, this is their last name, this is their anniversary, both of their birthdays, these are all their kids' names, they have 4 dogs, these are their names. You're writing so much information on there, and guess what? Your next server for that table is definitely going to want that information. But your hosts are the ones who have to sit there at the end of the night and put all of that information in. So they're doing a lot that you do not always see. It's really important not to get crazy with your hosts. I know sometimes it can be frustrating as servers when you're like, where are my tables at? Why am I not getting sat? Blah, blah, blah. You have to think about it from a host perspective. You know that a host is, making the floor assignments. So if they see all of these reservations, they're plotting each one of those reservations at specific tables. God forbid you get a day where the 3 reservations you had in your section cancel, or they just don't show up. That is not the host's fault. That's your reservation's fault. Be mad at them, because they're not here anyways, okay? Don't go up to the host stand talking all crazy, being like, oh, where my table's at, blah, 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 blah. No, you don't need to do all that. It's not their fault. Trust me, they're aware that you haven't gotten those tables, and they're doing their best to make sure that you're going to still make money that night, okay? Your hosts have your best interests because it's their job to have your best interests. I promise you, 9 times out of 10, the hosts are not out to get you, okay? Now, if you are the kind of person that talks crazy to the hosts and you demand things and you go up there and get in their way and try and mess things up, then they probably got it out for you. But that's on you. You did that to yourself. So that being said, your hosts do a lot that you don't always see. It's important to be kind to them and do not make their job harder than it already is, because you would not like it if they made your job harder than it already was, which sometimes they do by doing things like triple seating you, double seating you, whatever. It's not ideal, but as a server, it is your job to make sure that you can manage that properly, because it's going to happen in any restaurant. They can't avoid it, especially if they have several reservations coming in at one time, which most of the time, if it's a high volume restaurant, they do. That's how they avoid being on wait. That's how they avoid making guests angry at the front. So that being said, you as a server need to step it up and figure out how to recover from being double sat or triple sat, because if that's enough to put you in the weeds, then, I don't know what to tell you, but you might need to find a different job. I hate to say it. I will tell you though, as somebody who's been serving for a long time, what I have found is the most helpful is if you get double sat or triple sat and you greet one table, and while you're greeting that table, the other one gets sat. The easiest way to handle that without getting weeded is treat your entire section like a large party. If table 1 gets sat and you greet them, and table 2 is getting sat at the same time, once you are done greeting table 1 and getting their drink orders, you immediately go to table 2. You don't need to bring it in immediately. They could wait a few minutes, they'll be fine. I promise. Okay? And if you have that third table get sat, guess what? You know where you're going to go after greeting table 2? To table 3. Yep. Get all those drink orders, go to your POS, ring them in all at once. Okay? And guess what? All of your drinks will come out at once. And you can even work backwards to front if you would like. Me personally, I'm going to go back to table 1 and drop those drinks off first. They can see you have other drinks on that tray. They know that all those drinks are not for them, obviously. You tell them, here are our drinks. I'll be right back. I'm going to drop the rest of these off. When you get to table 3, yes, it's okay to tell them, hey, I'm going to go give y'all a few more minutes to look over the menu. I'm going to go take this person's order. Now, if they stop you and they're like, oh, we're ready to order, whatever you want to do, however you want to do it, that's fine. Personally, I will tell my table, are we ready to order once I get to table 3? If they are, take that order. Why not? You're already there. Go back to table 1, do table 2, same thing. Handle it like a large party. It makes your life so much easier when you think about it like that, because then it doesn't stress you out as much. It doesn't weed you as much. The flow is even more simple. The timing is still aligned the way that you need it to be. So that's really important. Biggest tip that I will give you today. Okay? Alrighty. Let's move on. So, your bussers and your server assistants. Like I mentioned earlier, we already know their responsibilities are the cleaning the tables, the resetting, assisting the servers, blah, 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 right? The reason that they are important, especially if you're working in a fine dining spot, if you do bread service, your server assistants are doing that for you. They're watering your tables. If you don't work in a fine dining setting, your bussers are still equally as important, because if there's a spill at your table, or if you have a table that's dirty and your entire section's dirty and you need to get it cleaned up ASAP so you can get sat again, they are there for that. That is their job. They're there to be on go, ready with that rag and that spray bottle of cleaner, okay? More specifically, though, for this topic, and why they're really important and why they're the backbone of supporting your servers, we're going to more refer to server assistants for the time being. Server assistants are also really important if you need extra hands. They are great for extra hands. If they see you clearing a table and you are trying to box up food in the back, and you, of course, only can carry 3 plates at once, or maybe sometimes even less, depending on the server. Calling them over, being like, hey, John, whatever, can you help me grab these other 2 plates? Bam, they're right there. They're grabbing them for you. If if your table doesn't have water, or your entire section is all running low on water, hey, can you water my section for me? Usually in a fine dining spot, you have server assistants that are assigned to multiple sections. I think it's usually 3 or 4 sections per server assistant, depending on how good they are. Because, you have ones that are really fast. You have others who are really strong. And also, let's talk about it, okay? There are certain restaurants, more specifically fine dining, where you do not have bar backs. Your bar back is a server assistant. And, one, that saves one less job position you have to hire for, which is great. But also, sometimes it can be bad, especially if you have a lounge area with your bar. If you only have one server assistant managing both, hey, as servers in that section, you gotta know you're not gonna get a lot of help today. especially if that bar is like fully sat, because they're constantly taking those bus tubs back and forth, loading those dishwashers, etc. So in situations like that, of course, it can be frustrating. I understand. Again, going back to what I was saying about the host, do not talk to your server assistants or your bussers crazy. They're still people at the end of the day. They're doing their best. Even if they're not doing their best and you can see that they're not doing their best, don't go to them and start being rude and telling them off. You don't need to snitch on them, okay? But, not to say snitch on them, but, mentioning it to a manager, being like, hey, like this person, this was their assigned task today and they weren't really helping me out. Like, could you just talk to them for me? It's all about the way that you communicate with your managers. Now, if you go to your managers and you're like, yeah, they suck, they're unhelpful, like they're always on their phone, blah, 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 they're never doing their job. Obviously, obviously your manager's going to have like, that same hyped up, energy when they go and talk to them. And then that's just not an effective communication, okay? Talk to people kindly, especially in the service industry. We are hotheads, okay? It's easy to get heated and to blow up and to be rude and whatever. But it's all about communication at the end of the day. The way that you communicate with people is so, so, so important in the industry. And, it'll save your life, truly. It'll make you a better server. It'll make your guests happier. Just making sure that you can help in all the ways that you can help, okay? Moving on. Food runners. So, food runners are really important because obviously they're taking the food to your table, so you don't have to run that food. That's one less thing that you have to do as a server. Thank you. We appreciate you. Okay? That being said, also, one of the things that can be frustrating if you have a food runner who's like, maybe a little busy. Your table might ask them for something. Sometimes you'll have food runners that you'll meet in this industry. I've met a few, okay, over my years. But you'll have some that, like, they'll be asked to get something and they'll either come and tell you so you can get it, or sometimes they just might not tell you at all because they're like, oh, like, the table will ask them for it. Wrong, okay? If your table asks a food runner for something, like, hey, can I get a side of ketchup? And your food runner's like, yeah, of course, I'll be right back. And they just don't do it, then guess what? Your table is still expecting that side of ketchup, but they're never going to receive it. And they're not going to tell you 5 out of 10 times because they're like, oh, well, the other person's getting it. I don't need to get 2 of them. So, this is why, for me personally, I'm not even going to try and just assume the best out of my food runners. If most of the time, currently the food runners I work with are amazing. Love them. They're great food runners, okay? Personally, though, even then, with my tables, when I go over to, like, do that quote-unquote 2-bite check back, I'm going to ask them, hey, is there anything that we need to go with our entrees? Did we ask the food runner for anything that I can go ahead and grab for us because I know they're busy? Verbiage. Hugely, hugely, hugely important when talking to your tables. If you over-communicate with your table, they're never going to complain about that, but it will make the service better. So if you tell them that and they're like, oh, well, we did ask for ketchup. Absolutely. I'm going to go ahead and grab that for you just because I know they're really busy because that line is full. Then they're like, they don't have that perception in their head that, oh, that food runner just didn't care about us and, like, didn't want to bring us our stuff. No. They now have that perception that, oh, the food runners are really busy and, like, they couldn't grab the ketchup. So she's going to grab it for us. Wonderful. See? Bam. You just completely eliminated a whole problem. You didn't have to get into no argument with no food runner, and you just made it simple. And you made it easy on yourself. You're welcome. All right. So, let's talk about, like, the kitchen. The kitchen is really important for, like, pretty much and the majority of the guest experience. Because your guests, maybe after a few times of dining with you, your guests might come to see you and might come to a restaurant for you. But majority of the time, your guests are coming to the restaurant for the food. Yes, they may love you, but the food is where the, consistency of them coming back is coming from. Like, they're going to come back every time because they really love the ribeye, or because they think we have the best oysters in town, or whatever. That being said, when kitchens make mistakes, it is really important for your restaurant and for you as servers to be able to recover a table. So depending on the restaurant you work for, you may have different recovery processes. Personally, I don't care what my restaurant's recovery process is. My process with my table is always the same. I over-apologize, even if I'm not sorry, even if I hate my guest and I hoped and prayed that their steak would be like overcooked, like burnt, charred, well done, because I hate them so much. Okay, that was a little harsh. I don't hate anybody, but you know what I mean, okay? Even if I feel that way about a guest, even then, still to their face, I'm going to have the most genuine look on my face and apologize to them so profusely that you would think that I kicked their puppy in the face, okay? That already makes the guest feel better, because then they kind of soften their heart and they're like, oh, she feels so bad, but it's not her fault. And a lot of times you'll hear that as a response. It's not your fault. You didn't cook it. Don't worry about it. We love you. You're doing great. Okay, cool. When you go to the back, do not start yelling at your chefs and being like, oh, you don't know how to cook a medium rare, blah. Stop. You don't need to do all that. They know how to cook a medium rare. Maybe they got a little distracted and left it on a little too long. Things happen, okay? The important part, though, is making sure that kitchen is going to get it out quickly. Because I've worked in a lot of steakhouses over the years, I pretty much know how long a steak should be on the grill for it to be the temperature that it needs to be. Also depending on the cut. So if I'm back there and I'm on the line and I'm sitting there watching it, okay, I know when chef is about to say, hey, pull that steak off, because I know just as well as he knows how long it should be on there. Obviously, if you're a new server, you're not going to know that kind of thing. But the reason that I wait on the line is because depending on your restaurant process, I know some restaurants, like if there was a mistake at a table, your manager is supposed to be the one to deliver it. Personally, if you're working in a restaurant where that's not the policy, I want to be the one to run it out. I want to be the one to bring them an extra side, or, a fresh side. I think if you get something wrong on a dish, more specifically a steak, whatever side that came with it, they need to get a fresh one. Leave the side that already came with it at the table so they can eat it and they're at least eating something, but always bring a fresh side. Even if your kitchen's like, I need a ticket, I need that side. I know you need a ticket, you'll get a ticket eventually. I need that side, okay? Because let me tell you, your guest is going to appreciate that so much, because there's nothing a guest loves more than free food, okay? All right. We don't want to talk too long about these steaks, so let's move on. So, we're going to talk about a little more on like how these roles really interconnect, so you can kind of really get a sense of what I'm saying. When a guest walks in, you go to a host stand, you tell them your reservation name, or you tell them your walk-in. Your host starts walking you to a table. You get seated at your table. You get greeted by your server. Your server assistant then comes, waters you, brings you bread, whatever. Or if you don't work in a restaurant like that, don't even worry about that part. You get your food, you get your entrees, dessert, whatever. You leave, okay? Your kitchen, all that food that you just got, your kitchen is a part of sending that out. Your food runners are a part of bringing that out, okay? Once you leave, your bussers are coming over, cleaning that table. Or your server assistants are coming over, cleaning that table, etc., okay? When a role doesn't play their role correctly, let's say you're a guest who comes in and you're like, hey, my reservation is party of 2 for John Doe, okay? They're like, okay, yeah, we're not really seeing a reservation for that. So it's going to be about a 10-minute wait. Okay, well, we made a reservation, like maybe it's under Jane Doe. Oh, yeah, here it is. Okay, yeah, just give us a few minutes. That wasn't a great interaction, okay? Guest might be a little upset now. They're like, she was kind of rude. Didn't really like that. Then they get sat. They're waiting a few minutes because the server hasn't greeted yet. They're like, it's fine. Probably busy, whatever. Server comes over, greets them, and they're like, hey, my server assistant's going to come over and water your table and bring you bread. Okay, great, wonderful. Walks away. Table's waiting. Server assistant nowhere to be seen. Water glasses are still empty. Bread is not on the table. They're getting upset now, okay? Server comes back. Oh my God, I'm so sorry that you guys have been waiting. Here, let me do it for you. So they do it for them, okay? They're like, it's fine. At least we got our water now. Whatever. They order drinks. They order apps. They order entrees. Entrees hit. Both of them order steaks, okay? One of the steaks, overcooked. The other steak, undercooked. Oh my God, I'm so sorry, guys. Like, let me go ahead and fix that. You take the things. They're like, wow, we've already had 2 rude experiences because the server assistant took too long and the host was really rude to us, and now our food is wrong. Now they're really upset. Okay? You come back, you know, your manager or you or whoever brings the food out, cut into it. Okay, they're good. They're right. Correct. Wonderful. Here's some fresh sides. Oh, well, that was really nice. She brought us fresh sides. Thanks. Right? Leave. They eat all their food, and they're like, oh, we opened a dessert. What are we thinking? Oh, I don't know. I think we're good. They're saying that because they've had a bad experience. Okay? Oh, yeah, absolutely. I understand. Let me go get the check. This is when you can do something like throw in a birthday dessert for them because you want to recover that table. Or any kind of free dessert. Even if your restaurant does like scoops of ice cream for like kids, throw it in there. Because you know what? They may fully 100% be full. Sometimes they just want a little sweet treat, but they don't want to fill themselves up. Get an ice cream scoop. It's fine. Or sorbet or whatever your restaurant offers, okay? Alrighty, here's the check. And I also brought this over because I really feel bad about your experience. And, you guys are so nice. And I just want to make sure that you enjoy the rest of your night. So here's a little gift from me to you. Oh my God, that was so nice. She totally did not have to bring us that dessert. Wow, this dessert tastes really good. Yeah, we're going to give her a good tip. They give a good tip. And they're like, wow, that was really great. Okay? Then they leave. They don't talk to the host, but they go home that night thinking, wow, our server really went above and beyond. And even though they messed up our food, when they got it correct the next time, it was really good. That is how a guest thinks. And then next time that they think about the restaurant, they're going to think about that. And they're going to be like, you know what? We're going to go back because the service was really great. And, we got a free dessert and that was really good. And our food was really good. Even though it was made wrong the first time, who cares? Whatever. That is how recovering can change, whether or not a guest will come back. Because you don't want to let a mistake that is made at your restaurant be the determination of that. That being said, that right there is also an example of how when your support staff is not doing what they need to do in the way that they need to do it, it can affect you as a server. But as a server, it is important that you can recover from those things, even if all goes wrong, like it just did in that example. Okay? So, here are some challenges that your support staff is really going to be feeling. For example, low visibility and recognition. A lot of times your bussers and your hosts and your food runners, they feel overlooked and underappreciated. Because, for them, they're doing a lot. Because most of the time, some of them have never been servers. They don't know what it's like. And for them, their job is a lot. And they're tired at the end of the night. So they're like, man, these servers are being applauded and given rewards and, pats on the back. Hey, good job, whatever. We don't get anything. And then they start to have a sense of resentment. So that is why it's important to tell your, server assistants, hey, good job. Tell your host, you're doing great today. You look so gorgeous. Like, how are you doing? Check in on them. Make friends with them. Okay? When you are thinking about things like this, a good way to make a busser or a server assistant or a food runner feel a little extra appreciated, tip a little bit extra. If you have any cash that you can give them, throw them an extra couple bucks. that for them feels really great, especially because most of the time they know as servers, you're making way more than them, okay? So that is something that they're always going to know and always going to hold in their heart as a birthing point of resentment. So you want to kind of be aware of those things. With being a server, with working in a restaurant, you are going to experience things like the physical demand, the burnout that comes with that. You're aware of it, they're aware of it. Make it an out loud topic. Be like, hey, are you doing okay today? Is there anything I can do to help you? Okay? Because sometimes we all have better days than others do. Be that person for them. Like I mentioned earlier, the money part of it. Obviously, as servers, like, you can get a table and make $100 or a $500 or a $50 tip off of them. Okay? That's a whole lot of money for one dinner. Okay? Your server assistants and your food runners and bussers and hosts, if your hosts get tipped out, they're only making a portion of that. So yes, when you're thinking about it, oh, well, if the whole staff is like tipping out $50 each, yeah, that's a lot of money for one person. But if they're then splitting that money between like 5 or 6 of them, then yeah, it's not a whole lot of money. And, you have to kind of be aware of those things. And that is also another reason why, for me personally, I always, always, always tell people, be kind to your support staff. Help them out in any way you can. If you're doing nothing and they're running around like crazy, do something to help them out. Because a little goes a long way. Okay? They're not asking for the world, but, just be kind. So, as everybody knows, okay, not too long ago, in about 2020, we had COVID-19. COVID-19 really changed restaurants. It changed the way that restaurants ran. I feel like we're now starting to kind of get back to a point where we are really being able to, run the way that we kind of used to. But I feel like there were things that we did before that we didn't, or things that we do now that we didn't do before that I think make it run a little easier. A lot of restaurants nowadays are more reservation based. Even restaurants that you really wouldn't think are as reservation based, they like really truly are. Which I think is super beneficial because it allows a restaurant to like kind of have a sense of preparation. They know how much they should be preparing, whether or not it's going to be a busy night, how many servers to schedule, how many bussers to schedule, etc., etc. Those are all things that really are helpful in a restaurant. Obviously, COVID-19 wasn't great, but some of the things that came after it were kind of great. All right, let's talk, let's finish up some closing points. For just a recap on these things, I really want to encourage my listeners to value every member of the hospitality team. They are incredibly important. You could not do your job as successfully as you do it without these roles. Okay? Have a sense of appreciation, especially, if you've ever been working in a supporting staff role. You already have that appreciation. So remember that. Remember the experiences that you had when you were working in that role. And if you've never worked in that role, really take time throughout your shifts going forward to really look at them and watch them and observe them and see how hard they're working, because I promise you it will give you a deeper sense of appreciation for them. Lastly, next topic that we have next week, I do have something special. I have another guest coming on. Different guests than you guys are used to, so I'm really excited about that. You will have to be waiting a little bit longer for it just because I am starting to kind of build on my marketing and visibility and advertisement for this podcast, because I do want to share it with so much more of you. But thank you again for tuning in for episode 3. I cannot wait for you guys to continue to hear the rest of this series. And maybe we'll start another series soon. We'll see. Thanks again, and I can't wait for you to tune in for our next episode. Bye!